You know how stressful it is when guidance systems go down. You lose field time. You lose yield potential. You lose patience. Help is here. Raven Cruiser 2 RTK with Slingshot. Precision simplified. Learn more at ravensimple.com.
Our weed of the week is one of the easier ones to control in many crops. It is green foxtail.
Oh, okay, now don't relax. When Brian says, oh, this is an easy weed to control for a lot of crops, yeah, it may be fairly easy to control, but you still have to get out there and do a good job at it.
And you need to identify it first, Darren. How are we going to identify green foxtail versus yellow foxtail? Isn't it all just pigeon grass?
Okay, well, when people say pigeon grass, I kind of cringe just a little bit because I realize, you know what, growing up, taking ag classes in my high school, and even some of the classes in college, we didn't focus in on specific grasses and weed identification. Like with green foxtail, for example, it's an annual weed, and so you can dig that grass plant up like every other grass plant. You'll find the seed down on the root if you dig it up carefully. Now with green foxtail, it looks like a lot of other foxtail seeds. It's relatively small. Then look at the above ground portions of the plant. Now when we look at green foxtail leaves, we don't see the long tufts of hair at the base of the leaf like we do with yellow foxtail. That's the easiest way to distinguish between those two weeds.
What you are going to find, whether it's yellow foxtail or green foxtail, is a hairy ligule, and that's the first step toward identification. Once you see hairy ligule, then that kicks you into the foxtails and just a couple other grass species. That kicks out a whole bunch of others. So look for that hairy ligule first, and then if you're finding no hairs on the upper leaf blades, chances are you've got green foxtail.
Okay, so let's talk about control here. When we think about green foxtail on our farm, it's usually one of the first grasses that get going in the spring. It's a cooler season grass. Now it can grow throughout the summer, there's no doubt about that. But we will see it just a little bit earlier than we see yellow foxtail and some of the other grass weeds that we fight, like woolly cupgrass and field sandbur. So we've got green foxtail out there early. The best thing that we can do is get a pre-emerge product down in just about every crop I can think of to control green foxtail.
Okay, it's real easy in the broadleaf crops like soybeans and sunflowers because you can go out with Sonalan, I think that's the best, but Treflan and Prowl are also very good. This gets a little bit more difficult when we get into the grass crops like wheat and corn. How are we going to stop green foxtail pre-emerge in wheat and corn?
Well, in wheat, we've got a few different options anymore for pre-emerge products. The best one for pre-emerge grass control right now is Prepare. That's the same active ingredient that's in Everest 2.0, but it doesn't have the crop safener in it because you're not spraying it post-emerge. And then in corn, there are a number of different options, whether it's Dual, Outlook, Harness, Surpass. They're all very good at grass control as well, especially on green foxtail.
You say very good, but a lot of people are using these reduced rates since they're following with Roundup in corn. Well, if you're cutting the rate on Harness, Surpass, Outlook, or Dual, you're not going to do as well. It's not even in the same ballpark as how you'll do with Treflan, Sonalan, or Prowl.
Well, that may be true, Brian, but there is a post-emerge option in Roundup Ready corn or Liberty Lake corn, and both Liberty and Roundup do a nice job on green foxtail.
Now, Darren, you mentioned Roundup. We don't have any Roundup resistant green foxtail at this point, but you know what? There is a little bit of green foxtail that's starting to show up as Treflan resistant. So that does make things a little bit more difficult on the pre-emerge side, but again, I wouldn't get too worried about it because we've got lots of good options post-emerge in soybeans or sunflowers.
Well, when you think about post-emerge choices in those crops, you've got products like Select Max, for example. You've got Assure 2. There are a number of different grass killers, also volunteer corn killers. Many guys are using them in soybeans just for volunteer corn control. But those products do a nice job on green foxtail. A couple of things though. When we're trying to control grass post-emerge, it is a nitrogen responsive weed. We like to have nitrogen like ammonium sulfate at 2 to 4 pounds per acre, or 17 pounds per 100 gallons is typically what's used with Roundup in many of these mixes. We also like to have crop oil or methylated seed oil. If we've got an oil in there, we do a better job penetrating through that leaf. We get better control than we do if we're using no surfactant or if we're using non-ionic surfactant.
Finally, if you have green foxtail and you need to spray it post-emerge in corn or wheat, in wheat, Axial is probably the best, but there are a number of other options there as well, including Wolverine, Discover, Gold Sky. You got a bunch of them. In corn, Roundup or Liberty, obviously in Roundup or Liberty crops, that'll be great. Otherwise, Accent would be the best thing post-emerge for green foxtail.
Well, our weed of the week once again is green foxtail. It can be a big yield robber on your farm, but it's fairly easy to control, especially if you get out in front of it with a good pre-emerge option. That's all the time we have for this week's weed, but there's more Ag PhD to come after this.